Hi, I'm Donna Fisher, the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the Ombudsman Program and resident rights, specifically resident rights in the assisted living. The purpose of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is to protect and improve the quality of care and quality of life for residents of long-term care facilities through advocacy for and on behalf of the residents. So what exactly does a local ombudsman do? We have 6 local ombudsmen stationed throughout the state who visit facilities on a continual basis. The goal for nursing home visits is monthly. Assisted living visits, our goal is bi-monthly. We also visit registered residential facilities and adult foster care. However, we have to be invited into those centers in order to enter. We just, nursing homes and assisted livings, we are able to enter those by state statute. We have the authority to do that. However, we do not have the authority to just enter a registered residential or adult foster center. We have to have an invitation into those centers. We follow up on complaints, determine if the events are likely to have happened, work in a person-centered advocacy role to resolve those complaints. Everything we do is confidential, and we're not able to share that outside of the Ombudsman Program unless we have received express permission from the resident themselves, or if the resident is unable to communicate the approval to share that information, we would go by the best thought that we would have, that whether that person would want that information followed up on or shared or not. We protect the residents' health, safety, welfare, and rights. We identify gaps in facility, government, or community services, and we work to try and fix those gaps. We do a lot of information and referrals. We send referrals to the long-term services and support specialist and other agencies as appropriate and as we're able. We can provide information about and help finding long-term care. Along with all of the things that you see on your screen, and I apologize, I don't really read what's on your screen very often, but okay, so really important is this intake flow chart. The reason that this is pretty important is the Ombudsman Program and the Ombudsman representatives are not mandatory reporters. In fact, by federal regulation, we are mandated not to be mandatory reporters. And so if an abuse or neglect report would come into the Ombudsman Program, the only way we can share that outside of our program is if we are given express permission by the resident themselves. And so it's really important that we follow the flow chart and LTSS, long-term services and supports, intake, APS, or law enforcement, Department of Health, someone else gets that report of abuse or neglect prior to the Ombudsman Program. Because like I said, once the Ombudsman Program gets that report, we can only do our internal information seeking and resolution with that. We are not able to share that outside of the Ombudsman Program at all. And so that's just really, really important for you to know. But that's just a really good flow chart to have maybe at your on your computer desk, or really handy so that you can ask those questions with each caller. LTSS can make a referral to the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program and can share information with the Ombudsman However, the Ombudsman cannot always share information back with LTSS. There are a couple of different ways that you can make a referral to the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. You can make a referral by completing the electronic referral form, which is a fillable form that you can type right into, and you'll see it there on your screen. You can also complete this form. It's just a written form that you can just write on and email to the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. Or kind of what I think most of your counterparts have found being the easiest way is to actually just print the call or the journal itself and send that over to the ltco@state.sd.us. In order to print that, you can see on your screen, you would go to that print button and click the arrow there, and you would print it to select that Adobe PDF. Then you would save that to your computer and then attach that into an email to the LTCO email address. And so that seems to be maybe the best way that your counterparts have discovered to email that to us. However, whatever works best for you out of those 3 referral processes, please feel free to use. Please email it to ltco@state.sd.us. You can always CC the local ombudsman on that as well, but they all have to come into state office for tracking purposes. And right there you'll see currently we have 6 regions, multi-county regions that are covered by the 6 ombudsmen. Once in a while we have a situation where there may be a conflict of interest at a facility, and that may require the Ombudsman Program to do some shuffling of facilities for a short time. So sometimes, this chart might not be 100% accurate. However, you would still just go by this chart in making those referrals, and we will internally do some of that shuffling. So that's nothing anyone else needs to really worry about. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about resident rights, specifically resident rights in the assisted living. Chapter 447009 is the resident rights in assisted living facilities or centers here in South Dakota. There are additional rights afforded to residents in nursing homes, which I will not maybe go into in depth during this presentation. Mostly you will be working with individuals that are in an assisted living center, and therefore these rights are the ones that you'll maybe need to be most familiar with in your position. There are also some additional rights imposed under the HCBS final rule. I may touch on some of them in this presentation, but encourage you to read the South Dakota Home and Community-Based Services Statewide Transition Plan and Expectation Guide. The state statute just ensures that when you leave your home, you take your rights as a United States citizen with you to your new home. The center must treat every individual that resides there with respect and dignity, and care for them in an environment that promotes, maintains, or enhances their quality of life. There must be equal access to care regardless of the diagnosis, condition, or payment source. The center must ensure that a resident can exercise his or her rights without fear of retaliation, without coercion, discrimination, or reprisal. It's pretty difficult at times for staff members to not want to, coerce or interfere or try and convince a resident to make good decisions for themselves. An individual retains rights to exercise all their rights, not delegated to a representative. Just because someone may have a power of attorney doesn't mean that all of their rights are transferred to that power of attorney. So sometimes when there's a power of attorney or a guardian, there's some maybe confusion or other expectations that may be there. If you ever have questions about that, please feel free to talk to an ombudsman or myself. Just because someone might have a power of attorney doesn't mean that the power of attorney is invoked. I might have a power of attorney today. That doesn't mean that I can't make my own decisions. Typically, those are in place once a person becomes incapacitated. However, there are so many different powers of attorneys out there that it's really important not to just assume that they're in effect when they may not be. If a resident does have a resident representative or power of attorney, the facility must honor the decisions made by that power of attorney or resident representative or guardian. An individual's wishes and preferences must be taken into consideration. An individual that has appointed a power of attorney, the power of attorney should be acting in accordance with what that individual would want or would have wanted, not within their own, placing their own bias and their own thoughts on the situation. They have the right to be informed of changes in their care plan. They have the right to receive services that are included in their care plan. They have a right to see their care plan. They have the right to participate in their care plan meetings. They have a right to invite people to their care plan meetings that may not receive an invitation. They have the right to be informed in advance of the care that will be furnished. They have the right to be informed of how much the services are going to cost. They have a right to be informed of whether the service will be paid for under Medicaid or if it will be an additional charge. They have the right to know in advance if their physician or anyone else has been contacted. Individuals have a right to choose their physician or their own mental health practitioners or pharmacists. There are some caveats to that. I mean, the doctor has to be Medicare or Medicaid certified to enter the facility. The pharmacist has some additional requirements as well as the mental health providers. And so as long as the folks that the residents choose meet all the requirements, then they are able to have those individuals provide services to them. And this next slide kind of talks a little bit about the physician needing to be licensed and etc. So the slide just talks again a little bit more about that choosing of the physician. So just familiarize yourself with that as well. Every individual deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. Sometimes it's pretty difficult when a resident is maybe challenging or having a challenging behavior to have your response be one of dignity, respect, and freedom. But a facility staff member should always have a response that is in dignity, respect, and freedom to the individual. Cultural, ethnical, and religious differences need to be appreciated and recognized. always, call the individual by the name that they would prefer. If you're not sure what the individual would like to be called, please, ask them what their preference is on their name, so that you're aware and you're respecting their wishes and honoring what they would like to be called. Residents have the right to make poor choices, just like you and I. If an individual is choosing to leave the facility and partake in alcohol or smoking or drugs or whatever the case may be, and just making those poor decisions, we all have the opportunity to make poor decisions. Just because we're in an assisted living center or nursing home or any other center or facility doesn't mean that we no longer have the capacity to make those poor decisions. We do. We have the right to listen to the doctor or not, drink a soda if we want to, smoke a cigarette, anything that is legal or illegal if we choose to do so. But we also have to face the repercussions of our choices, and what the individuals at the facility need to do is inform the residents of those, possible side effects of making the poor decisions. Make sure that you're always knocking on an individual's door before walking in. Make sure that you always respect their privacy, and don't just walk into their room without announcing yourself. Individuals have the right to talk to anyone inside or outside of the center. They have the right to talk to their LTSS worker. They have a right to talk to the ombudsman, the federal ombudsman, federal and state surveyors. They have the right to join or talk to any church or clergy that they desire. They must be allowed to utilize a telephone in private. Resist the temptation to make decisions based solely on what you think is best for the individual. Make sure that you're encouraging choice to the individual and really listening to what their wishes are and incorporating that into your work. Individuals have the right to plan their day, to take part in various activities in the center or in the community. There's a really good video. It's called The Thin Edge of Dignity. It really gives a really good perspective from the residents' viewpoint, and that really is just great. But they do have the right to plan their daily activities, when they want to wake up, when they want to go to bed, when they'd like to eat. This can be challenging for the facilities or the centers, but they really must adhere to and recognize each individual's right to do so. Each assisted living must provide a bed, a bedside stand, and a chair to residents. This is in the Department of Health regulations that those things are supplied. They must keep on hand 2 times the licensed capacity of linens. So if the facility is licensed for 10, they need to keep 20 sets of linens. And so that's just really important information for you to know. The facility or the center must provide linens, equipment, and supplies for personal care and for other ADLs commensurate with the needs of the residents served. So they need to take into consideration each individual that they serve and what their needs are. Each individual resident has the right to medical care and treatment. They have the right to choose their physician. They have the right to be told in a language they understand about what their cares are, what's in their care plan. Again, they have the right to participate in their care plan meetings. They have the right to refuse treatment. Just because an individual lives in a facility or a center does not take away their right to refuse treatment. The facility must inform the resident, consult the resident's physician, or notify the resident's legal representative if there was an accident resulting in injury, or a potential for necessary physician intervention. If there's a significant change in the resident's physical, mental, or psychosocial status, the need to alter treatment significantly, or a decision to transfer or discharge the resident from the center. Again, residents have the right to choose a personal physician. Residents have the right to request copies, and the facility may not charge more than a community standard rate for those copies. If the resident does refuse treatment, they must be fully informed of any alternative treatments and the expected outcome when refusing treatments. Individuals must be fully informed of their health statuses and be free again from interference, coercion, discrimination, or reprisal. Individuals in assisted living centers can give themselves certain medications under certain conditions. So if their doctor and the assessments at the assisted living determine they are able to give themselves medications, then they could do so. Confidentiality. It's really important that all patient charts and records are kept in a safe place, that individuals are not talked about in the community or in a place where others can overhear. Individuals have the right to have their pain recognized and addressed. Individuals have the right to work. They have the right to perform work in the facility or in the center or in the community or not. They have the right to receive a wage if they desire to work. If the individual wants to perform services on behalf of the facility or the center, the resident may perform those services if the plan of care includes documentation of the need or the desire to work, the nature of the service performed is specific, and compensation for paid services is at or above standard rate. The resident also must agree to the work arrangement. There are centers in the state where individuals, take care of the lawn, they take care of flowers, they take care of facility pets. There's this one center that has like a small farm in the backyard, and one of the residents kind of feeds all the animals, and they clean out the stalls and all of that. And so if there's just some kind of arrangement between the folks at the center and the residents residing there, then everything should be good to go. Individuals have the right to their own clothing and possessions. Everyone has the right to their personal possessions as long as space allows. And so sometimes you can get into a situation where an individual that's living in a center wants to have maybe boxes and stacks of items. There is fire and health safety codes that the center has to comply with, and so anything that would put that at jeopardy or at risk would be over and above the allowed personal possession requirement. All of these rights that I've talked about so far, and we'll talk about, each individual in the center has these rights. However, if they start infringing upon someone else's rights by exercising their rights, then the rights of all kind of trump the rights of one, and so that can be kind of a sticky wicket sometimes, and so you may need to request some ombudsman assistance to weed through some of those things. Freedom from abuse and restraint. Restraints. Medication must never be used to impose discipline or for the convenience of staff. Restraints are not allowed at all in an assisted living center. If they are, I believe you are to notify the Department of Health. Facilities centers must safeguard against resident abuse of any type: sexual, verbal, physical, mental, involuntary seclusion, exploitation by anyone, and theft of personal property. Visiting policies must permit and encourage visits by family and friends. Centers must permit residents to send and receive unopened mail, to have access to stationery, postage, and writing implements at the resident's expense, access and use of a telephone without being overheard, and visit or share a room with a spouse if they both agree, have their door closed and require people to knock before entering. They have the right to have their door locked if they have been deemed safe to have a lock and would like to do so. Talk privately with family and friends and other individuals. Again, they have the right to meet with and belong to any church that they want. They have the right to utilize the internet in private. Sometimes we run into situations where individuals are using, a center or facility computer. Oftentimes, these are maybe more out in a public area. Their rights to look at legal adult things such as pornography would possibly infringe upon the rights of others not to view pornography, and so there's kind of a fine line in that. However, if their individual is in their room and they want to look at legal pornography or whatever it is they want to look at, they should be allowed to do so even if it is off of the server of the facility or center. Financial affairs. Centers are not allowed to require residents to deposit their personal funds within the center, but if a resident chooses to do so and gives off written authorization, the center must hold the funds in accordance with South Dakota codified laws. They have the right to be told if they're entitled to Medicare or Medicaid and how to apply for those services. Admission, transfer, and discharge. Individuals must be provided information regarding their options and responsibilities while living at the center. So yes, while we advocate for resident rights, the resident has to also abide by some of the regulations. No matter where a person lives, there's always rules that you have to go by, whether it be an apartment or a dormitory or a center or a facility. You have certain rules that you have to abide by, and usually in the admissions agreement you're signing that you're going to agree to these rules, and so they need to do so. Information must be presented to the resident before they are admitted, so that's where the admission policy comes in. A description of the policy, which includes the length of time the bed will be held for the resident and any policies regarding the bed hold and readmission rates, should be given to the resident. Signed and dated admissions agreements must be completed upon the resident arriving at the center. The admissions agreement again should state all policies of the center and expectations of the resident, and it should also state what the center will provide. The center must notify the resident and family members or client advocates in writing at least 30 days before the transfer or discharge. The notice must specify specific reasons for discharge, the effective date of the transfer, and the location to which the resident will be transferred or discharged to. Must also include conditions under which the resident may request or refuse transfer within the center, and a description on how to appeal those decisions. Individuals have the right to voice their grievances and complaints and must not be retaliated against if they exercise those rights. The complaint can be anything, really. Anything regarding abuse, neglect, misappropriation of the resident's property, and more. The center must adopt a grievance process and have the process available to the residents. Residents and family and the public have the right to examine the most recent survey results and any plans of corrections that are in effect.